up, guys? I'm back, and today we're here with the 2025 BMW S1000RR. And anyone that knows BT Moto knows BMW is our bread and butter. Now for 2025, BMW did quite a few different things with the S1000RR. It's not a new gen, it's not a new engine, but there are slight variances to everything on what they've offered. Now the fairings are the obvious look on the bike, so that's the biggest change you're going to see. The mid fairings, the front fairings, that's all been changed. Even the color on the subframe trellis and even the finish on the subframe trellis is different. But these are small little nuanced differences because the trellis itself hasn't changed, just the coloring on it. Now the biggest change, of course, is the wings. Now these wings offer just as much downforce as the M1000R. It's about 50 pounds at 186 miles per hour. They keep the front end down on the bike, so they kind of hang down to the sides, or I've seen a lot of complaints about it, but BMW does that because the flat wings provide less support in corners when you need the downforce on the front of the bike. And when they're turned like this, one side of the wings is actually helping, the other side of the wings is doing nothing. So they've actually engineered it so the slant in the wings isn't just for aesthetics, that's for more usability of the wing itself. Now, there's no power changes. We're still making that 205 horsepower we did for 23 plus, but they did change the cylinder head. Now, the cylinder head itself came from the M1000RR, and they did that in 2023, but the S1000RR head in 2023 was a cast porting, whereas this is actually a machine ported head with different valves, different valve springs. Everything's made to be lighter so it can rev higher in a more reliable manner. We've also got the quick action throttle on the bike. The quick action throttle means that instead of a 72-degree turn, which I made a whole video on how to swap it to your older models, now you get a 60-degree turn. And with the M1000RR that's coming out here shortly, we're going to get a 58-degree turn. So it's 2 degrees more on the M1000RR, or 2 degrees less on the M1000RR than it is on the S1000RR. As far as the software changes go, I've been riding this thing on the freeway. I had to break it in for 600 miles, so I'm pretty well versed with how the bike feels now, and I can tell you the quick shifter logic is better, and the restrictions are delivered differently than they did on the 23 models. So the quick shifter itself, this is a bi-directional auto blipping shifter, always been amazing, and BMW has always had the best feel on quick shifters, but the 25 S1000RR is at another level from the 23, 24 models even. So in 2020 they came out, or this gen came out, we had a very good feeling quick shifter. The 23 came out, it felt even better. They took the logic from the 21 M1000RR and put it on the 23 S1000. But then they upgraded the 23 M1000. So it's kind of like this trickle down effect they take from the M1000 and put it to the S1000RR. Now at 25, we've got a almost seamless quick shifter. It feels like it's almost like an automatic transmission. This is a seamless downshift. Seamless. And if I go up, I gave it a little too much throttle there. If I go up here, I'm noticing nothing. Like, there is no change in this bike. It is seamless. It's crazy how well they've done the engineering in the quick shifter. Other brands need to take notes here because I've never felt a quick shifter stock on a bike that is this sorted. Other changes in the software, I'm noticing the cold start that we typically get from BMW, that really high cold start that we all hate, that's like 2,500 RPMs or something like that. It still is high, but it seems like it's more refined where it's not making the bike pop and burble, at least not on this exact one. It seems like it's more refined, I guess you could say. And it doesn't have an effect, a negative effect on the engine, though I don't like the high revving right when you fire the bike up. Other than those software changes, nothing huge. The throttle tip and stuff like that, of course, now that we've got that quick action throttle, we have less of a turn for more throttle response, so it feels like you're getting more power if you're really used to the older models, but you're really not getting more power. It's just less of a turn to equate to more throttle position. Now let's talk about the negatives here. The restrictions on the 25 S1000R, those did not change, unfortunately, from the older models. They are tweaked, however. So second gear still is completely messy. I mean, you can go in 6th gear cruising at 60 miles per hour and it feels faster when you hit the throttle than if you're in 2nd gear at 60 miles per hour. That's how much they've restricted that 2nd gear. But these restrictions are horrendous. We're talking 50 to 60 wheel horsepower in 2nd gear. And of course, the restrictions also exist in 3rd, 4th, and 5th gear, although the restrictions get less and less and less the higher gear you go. 2nd gear being the worst offender, of course. Now, we still have that same restriction up top, but it's not 20 wheel horsepower, at least not what I'm feeling so far. It feels like it's less, but it still feels like it's there. But it feels like BMW has tried to listen to people and get that sorted out. Now, a note on the restrictions themselves. People email us all the time and they're like, well, if BMW couldn't do it, how do you guys do it? How do you get 60 wheel horsepower of a bike when BMW couldn't do it? Well, that's not the case here, guys, because if you go to Europe, the software on the BMW doesn't have those kinds of restrictions, or they're not as bad. They are still there a little bit, but the bike is very rideable for a Euro version, whereas the US version is just completely a mess. Now, there's no different parts on the bike whatsoever between the Euro version and the US version. It's just the software is different. That's it. They didn't make a better motor for Europe. It's just the US version has nasty restrictions, and that is for compliance to be sold in the US. It needs to reach a certain hydrocarbon compliance. It needs to reach a certain noise emission compliance. In order to reach those, it has to put a restriction on the engine, because if the government says, hey, you can't sell your bike unless you do this to the engine, or unless you dull the power on it, they're not going to make a brand new engine for that. All they're going to do is dull what they have now. So this isn't a BMW problem, it's just a software problem, and it's because BMW has their hands tied. And that's where we come in with our 50-state legal tuning, and I'll get more into that later. Now, another thing that's new on this bike is the seat. Now, we've taken the seat, someone talking at me? Now, we've taken the seat from the M1000RR, the 23-24 models, and we've slapped it onto the S1000RR, which is a wider and longer seat. So it gives you more usability and more flexibility in corners, so you have more room for you can plant your butt down when you're mid-lean. Just gives you kind of more real estate. However, that also means the bike is an inch higher because it is a higher seat. Now, you can also opt for a comfort seat, which would be lower. But if you like this seat, and let's say you're a short king and you still can't get your feet on the ground, we are more than happy to provide you with our lowering kit. Our lowering kit doesn't affect the rideability or handling, assuming you do it according to our video. And if you do the 1-inch drop, let's say you're 5'5" or above, the 1-inch drop would probably be fine for you, and you don't have to do any cutting on the bike whatsoever. It's a real easy swap. Now, overall, this bike at low speeds feels very sorted. I am in Race Pro right now, and the bike is maxed out. It feels a little bit twitchy. As you can see, I can make it very twitchy if I want to by handling the throttle differently. But I can also go into the modes here, which most people don't do. Now, you can do this in the Race Pro, or you can just do this in the Combi. I'm gonna put it in rain real quick, just so you guys can see. It's no longer jerking that much as it was before, right? Now, you can change all that in the Race Pro settings under engine. You can kind of dull the throttle a little bit, and a lot of people don't know that. They just think, hey, the throttle comes as is, put it in race, and that's all they do. But go into your Race Pro settings and customize your bike to make it feel the way you want it to feel. But the modes are also here to make things simple as well. So as far as low speed rideability goes, this feels like the older bike, no issues. I'm not feeling extreme amount of heat from the bike whatsoever. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because when I say the bike isn't hot, I'm comparing it to a lot of other bikes I ride that are very hot. Now, this is a leader class super bike, meaning it's not gonna be the coldest bike between your legs, but for a leader class bike, it's extremely comfortable riding it with this kind of heat. And I'm just on a normal day here, a little over 70 degrees. And riding this bike at low RPMs is so easy. I mean, I could put this bike here at 6th gear. It's not chugging along, it's just fine. And we're talking, this is 2,000 RPM. I don't know how many other super bikes you can ride at 2,000 RPM at in 6th gear at 20 miles per hour, 25 miles per hour, and it's perfectly fine to ride. The seating position on the bike is extremely nice. I mean, this is a great seating position for the bike. It feels more relaxed than a lot of other bikes in the market currently, and the bike feels very flickable, very flickable. And this one is the M competition bike. I mean, we're talking, this thing weighs 425 pounds, whereas the standard model or the base model is probably about 435 pounds, right around there. Fully fueled, we're talking that's wet weight. And you can even probably drop that a little bit off if you get the titanium exhaust, which is an option as well with this bike. Now, the bike is extremely quiet. This exhaust valve is closed on this thing. I can barely hear it. I can hear the wind noise at 37 miles per hour over the exhaust. A lot of you are going to hate that, but with the BT Moto Flash, we'll open that up, and again, I'll go over that later as well. Now, BMW also has engine acoustics, or throttle off engine acoustics, which basically means burble. Let's see if I can do this and make it work. Do you hear that? I don't know if you guys can hear this. It just sounds like a little popping here and there. It's more pronounced if you have an exhaust on here, but with a stock exhaust, you can barely hear it. And it's actually something that people love. People like to hear the bike burble, and it does it stock. And BMW controls that. And another thing, if I put this into another mode like road mode or rain mode, it will turn that off, meaning there are no burbles in the back end of the bike. So if you guys want burbles, you have to put it in Race Pro. Now the S1000RR also comes with cruise control and heated grips. Heated grips is something like the 25 Panigale V4 does not come with, and cruise control in the Panigale V4 is over $300 add-on, and it's a subscription service, meaning it only lasts for 5 years and you got to pay for it again to renew that subscription. It comes standard on all S1000RRs, another thing that I love about this bike. Now let's get into what people buy the S1000RR for, the power. Now let me show you this restriction right here. Second gear, 50 miles per hour. I'm gonna give you 100% throttle, and I'll show you exactly what happens. 100% power. See, power comes on. It just comes on all of a sudden at about 9,000 RPM, and it just goes right up in the sky. That's the second gear restriction we're talking about there. It just lays the power on. In first gear, it's very static. There's no restriction in first gear, so I'm able to take first gear, go straight up in the air. There's no restriction on it. Now let me go over what we're going to be doing today with the bike. We did the low speed stuff. Now I'm going to go take this bike to some more top end stuff, some spirited canyon riding, and see how it feels up top. Then we're going to take this bike to the dyno and see what it does stock, and then what we can do with it flashed. And then I'll be doing my post-ride review and comparing those same scenarios again and see how we've improved upon the bike. So let's get this bike over to the fun section of road now. All right, so here we are on the top end stuff. Let's see what this bike can do. Now, me going into second gear in mid-range feels absolutely horrible. Full power right now, nothing's happening. This is extremely upsetting in mid-corner balance. You're coming out of a turn, it just throws a bunch of power at you. It's not good for the bike, it's not good for the rider, it's not good for the balance. Nothing is good there, but the anchors are extremely good. It's just you have to keep this bike above 10,000 RPMs to even make it usable and not dangerous. So it has plenty of power. The delivery is horrendous. And that's all due to the restrictions. Let me see the tip-in. Low speed tip-ins, even on Race Pro, maxed out. Still extremely manageable and can be dulled. Delivery is just, oh my god, worst delivery ever. I don't know who decided the fact that this is the way to do this, but it's not. Here we go, get some speed in her. Come on, baby. Brakes are very good. These Nissan anchors really can put a stop to this thing. But then coming out of second gear here, no power. It's distractingly bad. It changes what would otherwise be an amazing ride into something you have to constantly think about in fear. Oh my, no way. Short shifting is just out of the question. You have to run it all the way to the limiter. You have to rely on electronics a lot on this bike if the stock setting. While the bike has a lot of power, I am definitely not a fan whatsoever of how it delivers it when you do spirited riding. Although it has plenty. See? And it just pulls it right off the ground like nothing. And the second gear, come on. There's nothing in this bike in second gear. It feels like a 600, even less power than a 600. So that was a little bit disappointing. I expect to have a lot more fun. I mean, it'd probably be more fun in a 600 than this, the way the power delivers. So let's see what the 60 through 130 looks like on the 25 S1000RR. All right, and we are set for a stock 60 through 130. I have all the nannies off. Let's get it. No power, no power, no power, no power, no power. Power, power. You guys guys saw it, that is a 4.9 60 through 130. That's a disappointment for this bike, and I did start that ride in second gear. Now, a lot of people are going to complain and say, well, you can start in first gear and really get more power. Yeah, I could, but I want to show everyone that second gear, how bad those restrictions are and how much they affect the times of this 60 through 130. And we also saw the 100 to 150 at 4.5, which again, I feel is extremely soft for this bike. I also did a top speed pass on the bike. Top speed there, it's only 188 on GPS, and I believe that's a gear max. The 1746 gearing we have for the sprockets on this bike will only allow up to 188 miles per hour with the RPM where we have it at currently. So before we go to the dyno here, let's kind of wrap everything up for what I think of the bike. Low speed cruising, this bike is amazing. Probably the best there is of a leader bike, but that's not what the whole story of a leader bike is. You're supposed to be able to ride the bike normally, but also be able to twist the throttle on the bike and make it into a monster from mild to wild, right? That's the whole dream of a sport bike or a super bike. This bike does the mild very well. It does not do the wild well at all. And that's just due to those restrictions. That's it. If we get rid of those restrictions, I think we're going to be golden, and we'll see what happens after the dyno. But man, I was so disappointed with that spirited riding. If you told me I had to buy the bike like this and this is how it would stay, I would not buy it. Now, there are other options that BMW offers. They call it the quote-unquote torque map. Now, the torque map we've tested ourselves on the dyno, stock versus torque map, and they do give you power back in the mid-range, but it is not all the power at all. In fact, you're still missing a lot of power, like 20 wheel horsepower from the mid-range itself. And then they also pull 20 wheel horsepower off the top end of the motorcycle. So you end up sacrificing a whole bunch of power either way. You have to keep it stock, and you got that massive difference in the mid-range there. Or if you do it the torque mapping from BMW, and you've got a massive hole now in the top end, and you still have a hole in the mid-range. In my opinion, it should be a nice even power band, especially for track riders, people that like to ride spirited. That surprise in power, it's just no good. It's no good for anyone. It's no good for the bike. It's no good for you as the rider. You can't anticipate it mid-turn. It's just, it sucks. But that is my biggest complaint with the S1000RR. I think it does everything else extremely well. All right, and I think that's going to do it for our pre-flash review. Now it's time to take this thing over to the dyno and see what you can actually do. What's up, guys? I'm back, and I'm here with the 2025 S1000RR Lee Cycle in San Diego. They're a dealer for BT Moto. I have the bike on the dyno finally fully unlocked. We're gonna be testing this bike completely stock. You can see stock exhaust. I have a stock air filter. There are no mods in this motorcycle mechanically whatsoever. Now, this bike is gonna be on 91 pump gas because we're here in California. I'll be testing our tuning, plus I'll be also testing VP racing fuel like we do with the other 25 models to see exactly where this bike stacks up with the other 25 models we've done, and I'll also do some comparisons with other models and older S1000RRs. Let's get started with stock tuning. All right, stock runs are completed on our 25 S1000RR, and what do we get here? We got a total of 191 rear wheel horsepower and 84 wheel torque, which is not bad actually. I mean, we did this first thing in the morning. I wanted to make sure that the heat wasn't going to be an issue here, because to let you guys know, the hotter this bike gets, the more it's going to pull power, more and more and more. It has a torque limiter in there, and if the IET gets too hot, it pulls all kinds of power. So I wanted to make sure we gave this stock runs a fair shake. I did that first thing in the morning before our tuned runs, everything, just to make sure we got the most power out of the bike we possibly could. Now, these are stock restrictions that we're seeing here. We're seeing some restrictions here, some restrictions here. So it's not really good to compare a stock run to another stock run in another bike. In my opinion, that's all garbage because they're actually restricting these bikes so much that it's not a fair comparison. So let's just get this thing tuned real quick and then we'll do some real comparisons here. Okay, we're all wrapped up with the tuning now. So this is BT Moto tuning here versus our stock runs, and we got a total of 202 rear wheel horsepower versus the 191 stock. So that's 11 wheel horsepower jump over stock. And you can see over here at the top end, we're not even increasing the RPM limiter. We're just getting rid of that soft RPM because any that ridden these bikes get to the limiter, it's kind of this very soft limiter up top. It's kind of weird, whereas this is a hard limiter now with ours. So it seems like it's more RPM. It's actually not more RPM. And we're getting 3-wheel extra torque, but across the entire range here, you're seeing gain. There's a little bit of a restriction right here, and you can see we're gaining a total of 9-wheel horsepower in that restriction area, and we're also gaining 7-wheel torque, which is pretty good because we're at 7,000 RPM. That's cruising range as far as I'm concerned, or freeway range. And then we're also getting some power up here, and even at the red line here, or closer to red line, we got 185 versus, I mean, that's 16-wheel horsepower right there just up top. And this is our racing range here from 12,000 to 15,000. And we're also getting more torque even, 7-wheel torque. Now here's a comparison you're gonna wanna see. Here's second gear. So second gear on the S1000RR. Now, second gear means we're skewing the numbers a little bit here because the gearing isn't proper for dyno runs, so kind of discard the actual numbers there. But let's see the actual power curve here. We know that that second gear is horrible from the 20 plus S1000RR, and you can see how much power we're gaining just from second gear. We're going from 60 to 106. I mean, that's 46 wheel horsepower. That's insane. And how about the torque here? We're going from 44 to 79. That's over 30 wheel torque. That's crazy. And anyone that owns this bike knows exactly how horrible this feels. Now, these restrictions go from second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and actually fifth gear. You can see a little bit of restriction there that we saw just a second ago. And they get less worse. So second gear being the worst, and then third gear is less worse, fourth gear less worse than that, and it keeps going and going and going. But right now in second gear is the worst one. In fact, you could probably go into second gear, give a wide open throttle at 6,000 RPMs, and the bike will feel slower than if you just lay into sixth gear at the same speed. That's the funny part. That's how bad this thing feels. And again, we're fighting the IET here. I mean, I'm looking at the IETs and we're over 90 degrees on the IET because I didn't do any mechanical stuff to this bike. Like I said, we will be coming back to the dyno to do an IET test with our velocity stacks and all kinds of mods that we put onto the motorcycle to see exactly how they fare versus stock. But I wanted this to be a true stock comparison just with flashing and nothing else. I mean, the exhaust valve we did wide open, but that's through software. The intake flappers are wide open, but again, that's through software. That all comes with our stage 1 flash, by the way. Now for the fun part, let's do some comparisons. So this is a good one here. This is our 25 Ducati Panigale V4 versus the 25 BMW S1000RR. So blue is going to be our S1000RR run, and red is going to be the V4 run. Now you can see we're gaining a nominal difference here, about 2-wheel horsepower, and actually the torque is actually in favor of the S1000RR, surprisingly, being that it's under 1,000 cc's technically, and the V4 is 1,103 cc's, and it's making more torque, and that's due to that shift cam technology that BMW has. Right here is all the shift cam. Gorgeous stuff. Looks great. And look at that torque. I mean, the gains over this thing are absurd. Look at that. And if we look up top here, the BMW is getting that 200 wheel horsepower up top and 196 for the V4. V4 is a little bit more RPM than the BMW. In the racing range here, we got the BMW taking it over that V4. That's the surprising part. How about we check out the CBR now? Now here it is. This is the CBR RRR 2025 that also has our velocity stacks in it already. So it's modded versus the 25 S1000RR. Now the 25 S1000RR is here in blue. The RRR is here in red, and you can see it's absurd amounts of power. If I can get it to click, there you go, look at that. Horsepower and torque, just, it's not even comparable. I mean, The Triple R is not known to have a low and mid range. It's kind of lazy there, but it's supposed to scream up top. You see this Double R is just destroying things, man. I mean, this is awesome, the power it's making here just on pump gas. Of course, we've got a little more RPM here for the Triple R, but look how much power we're making with the Double R over the Triple R. I mean, every part of this RPM, it can't touch it. And how about this one? This is a 2023 BMW S1000RR versus a 2025 BMW S1000RR. And you can see the blue run is going to be our 2025 S1000RR, and the red run is a 2023 S1000RR. So it's kind of different how they're making power here, and you see a little bit more power up there, and it could be due to that new head or the revised head. They put new springs in it, a few different things to make it a little bit more lightweight. And it could attribute to a little bit of horsepower, but overall very similar across the entire run. So now it's time for some race gas runs right now using the VP fuel we have. I'm going to drain this tank to the point where there is nothing in it. It's going to be bone dry. It won't start. See that? And then we're going to go ahead and see how much power this thing can make. Do we have a new king for 2025? We'll see. Race gas tuning is done, and you can see here we got a total of 211 rear wheel horsepower versus the 202 on that pump gas. And it's a nice steady gain across the entire RPM range. It isn't just peak power, it's everywhere, and you feel it at the track. If you actually take this to the track and use this fuel, it feels like a different bike. It's addictive how the bike feels with this stuff in it. So at 211, we're not making more than our V4 did on the stock exhaust, so that's a apples to apples comparison right there. So the V4 responding very well as the BMW to race gas. I mean, 211 on a completely stock bike with a stock exhaust system is absolutely absurd. I don't really know anyone that needs this kind of power, but I think I do. Now, if you have this bike in warm weather, for example, you're definitely going to want our tuning, because the torque limiters on this dictate that once the IETs get to a certain level, and we saw it was 70-something degrees today, or like 75 degrees today, and it's reading 99 degrees in the combi, 100 degrees in the combi if you let it sit and idle for a second. When it sees a certain temperature, it starts pulling massive amounts of power from the motorcycle. We actually enable our tuning so that you get that power back, but not only that, it stays reliable. We don't want any adverse effects that are a detriment to the motorcycle as a result of our tuning. So we make sure all this is tested before we even give it to you guys, and that's why we buy these motorcycles in the first place. When I got here, it was 25% throttle, 50% throttle, 75% throttle, and then 100% throttle tuning. So we tuning not only just 100% throttle or wide open, but we want to tune it for every scenario, because not everyone is racing this bike. I think we know probably the majority of the customers that buy these bikes, these leader class super bikes, the Ducati, for example, are spending 30,000 plus on a bike. They're probably not just solo tracking these things, even though they're track beasts. They're probably just taking to Starbucks, they're probably just going to bike meets, cruising down the road. I mean, they're probably just gonna have a good time with the bike, what they consider fun, and that's fine. You can spend your money how you want, you can use the bike how you want. Our job is to make the experience of riding this motorcycle better than anyone else can make it. You won't find that with any other tuner. But what comes unique to us is we actually use programs that are OEM level, and we have OEM level help as well. We have people at the factory level sending us information. The experience we have helps us with developing these tunes for the newer bikes, because a lot of the older stuff translates to the newer stuff. But like we have with the full-time closed loop, we were the first people to do that, and I don't know anyone that actually can enable full-time closed loop properly other than us. So I guess bottom line, what I'm saying here is do your research when it comes to tuning. We have a litany of videos. We try to help the community as much as possible. That's why we do the fairing swap video. We make $0 doing that for a fairing swap from our 25 to our 23. We just see you guys want to do it, and we'll help you guys out. We're also going to be doing that throttle swap on this one. And that's, again, we're not making any money. We can't tune anything with that. We can't tune the fairings to the 23. We're just doing that to help you guys, because at the end of the day, we're motorcycle enthusiasts. That's how we started out in this game. So do your homework. Make sure the person that you're going to be going with, whether it's us or whomever, has not only just product information that's a couple bullet points on their website, but a litany of information. Go to the social media, see what they're posting up.
Go to the YouTube channel, see what they're posting up. If it's nothing on their website, or I'm sorry, it's nothing on their social media, for example, that is just talking badly about other tuners, that's a red flag. If their own work can't speak for themselves and they need to talk badly about other people just to sell a couple parts, that should be a massive red flag for you guys. Haters only hate when they can't replicate. That's how it works. And yes, we know the price of our tuning is maybe $100 more than the other guy, but here's how it works, guys. I'll give you 3 options. You can have something fast, cheap, and reliable, right? Those are your 3 options, but you're only allowed to have 2 of those. That's how motorsports works. So if you want fast and you want cheap, it's not gonna be reliable. If you want reliable and fast, it's not gonna be cheap. That's just how this works. So you get 2 out of 3 of those options. So that's why we urge people to go with us. OEM level, great customer service, and the world records to back it up. We're also the only tuners that are 50 state legal. That's it. We're it for third-party tuners. If you look on our website and our dealers page, we have dealers, actual BMW dealers that sell our product at the dealerships. So I think it's going to wrap up the testing on our 2025 BMW S1000RR for today.
What's up, guys? I'm back here on the transformed 2025 BMW S1000RR. It feels so much better. Remember that flat spot in second gear, right around this RPM? How about now? No more flat spot. This is actually the bike we paid for. This is it right here. Before, it was a neutered version of the bike we paid for that was getting its cheeks clapped by 600s at every turn. This bike, however, is amazing. And with that open exhaust valve, it actually has a really good sound to it now. The quick shifter, I'm not really noticing a huge difference in the quick shifter to shifting, but again, like I said before, the quick shifter is amazing. There are adjustments to these things, but I'm just not noticing it as much as I would on some other models that we've tested on BMW or other makes, where you can say, oh wow, that's a lot faster. Just cruising the bike around is really civil, really nice. A lot of the tuning that goes into the 25%, 50%, 75% throttle stuff is based on cruising around town like this and just kind of keeping a throttle where you're going to be consistent, but it's not going to be jerky. But then we've also got more throttle response in it now. So we've added throttle response, so it's more responsive, but at the same time less jerky. And there's a few ways to tune around that, and primarily getting the air-fuel ratio really helps that out quite a bit. And what we do, and this is a BT Moto exclusive, meaning no other people can do something like this. This is a full-time closed-loop bike. I know there's a few armchair mechanics saying, well, you know, the BMW S1000RR does that stock. Well, that's true. It does do closed-loop stock, but it's not full-time. It only does it partially, and that's at low RPM and low throttle. If you go this thing wide open throttle, for example, it doesn't go closed loop anymore. So we do it where it's full-time closed loop at a specific lambda target that we nail. So what's that mean for you? That means the bike adjusts at all times. It always is adjusting to hit that lambda target, and that includes any kind of modifications you do to the motorcycle. For the most part, all those modifications are going to be good. Let's say you replace the slip-on or whatever it may be. That's going to be fine because it's going to adjust for that. Another thing that keeps this bike feeling pretty decent and more consistent is the intake air flapper. Now, the intake air flapper was new for 2020, and it was a closure, a kind of a gate at the front of the airbox. Looks like this, and it opens up. Now, the only time that intake opens up, or those gates open up, is at 6,000 and above RPM. That means me riding the bike right now, 5,700 or whatever, those would typically be closed. Now, we've opened those wide open with our stage 1 tuning, which means you're going to get better sound from the bike, and you're going to get more consistent temperatures. However, while I'm stopped, that thing will start to shoot through the roof. Let's say I idle this bike for a while. The sensor just heat soaks because it's sitting on top of the engine. And that's what we have an IET relocation kit, which I have not installed yet. And regarding the IET, and this also kind of builds into why there's so much of a restriction into that second gear, third gear, which I've explained pre-flash, which is because of emissions and compliance regulations. Same thing with the intake and exhaust valves that we have now. They're basically for compliance, and that also feeds into the IET. It's for compliance, believe it or not, because Ducati's figured this out. They put their IET in the front of the bike, but also Ducati inflates their numbers like you wouldn't imagine. They're saying 230, 240 horsepower, but on the dyno it's making 200. And this bike's claiming 205, and on the dyno it's making 200. So why is there such a discrepancy? Well, BMW, they're pretty smart, so they put their IET on top of the motor, and we know when you put the IET on top of the motor, the way the logic works on this bike is there's a multitude of ignition tables. Not one, not two, but there's like 20 or so ignition tables on this bike. And it works off knock feedback, meaning if I put 91 pump fuel in here, which is in here right now, and I have a high ignition table that's a few degrees more timing than a low ignition table, what it does is it works off the knock sensors. It'll go to a certain ignition table, it'll see if there's any knock from the motor. If there is knock, it'll go to a lower ignition table. We do touch the high ignition tables, but the low we don't touch. And we do touch knock feedback sensitivity. That's one thing we do touch because there's a lot of false knock this bike sees. But that requires hundreds of hours of testing that we've done on the dyno. And we also take this bike to the street and then log it on top of that. So there's a lot of stuff that we do to make sure this bike stays extremely consistent. But going back to the IAT sensor, they put it on top of this engine so it does heat soak. So when you're at 70 degrees and you're letting the bike idle on a dyno for, let's say, 10 minutes or whatever it may be, now the bike's reading 117 degrees in the airbox. It pulls the ignition timing and the power out of the bike. So when this bike is being tested for compliance, now it's reading lower power, it's less hydrocarbons, it's less emissions, it's less noise emissions because it's producing less power. But on the street, it gets that power back after a few miles. BMW sandbags everything they have. Their M3, the G80, there are complaints literally lodged in by Audi and Mercedes saying, hey, BMW's cheating a little bit here. They're just kind of saying their numbers are really low when really the numbers are crazy high, which is actually a really cool thing about BMW in my opinion. Now let's go over some other stuff we've done with the bike here. We've also put the engine fan on temps lower. Not that I'm really complaining about this bike. I mean, you get a liter class super bike, you're expecting to be a little bit warm between the legs. It's kind of like a normal thing. But the BMW is actually really good. I mean, you ride a Ducati for a while, you get on this bike, it's like heaven. But we did lower the fan on temp for the bike, and the reason we do that is very simple. The cooler the engine stays, that means the cooler the oil is. The cooler the oil is, the longer the oil lasts. The longer the oil lasts, the longer your engine lasts. So that's why we lower the fan temp slightly on it. Also, when we make the adjustments to the ignition timing, the air fuel, the certain things that we do, it keeps everything cooler on the bike and running a lot better. Even more reliable than stock. And speaking of stock, I know a lot of people out there are going to be wondering about that warranty question. What's with BT and warranty? Well, we just went to the dealer, did the first service, and I did a whole video on this. You can see it there in the top right. So now I'm going to take this bike up to do some canyon riding really quick. And we're going to see how this bike feels in the top end. I really can't wait. Honestly, this bike feels incredible right now. All right, back to the top end stuff here. Let's see how this bike feels over that stock. Felt like garbage stock. Let's see how this feels. So second gear, coming out of a turn. Let's go. Oh man, we've got actual power. I like it, actual power. These Nissan anchors are actually pretty nice. D-cell is very nice as well. Mid corner, throttle inputs are very good. We'll try low speed here in a second. Coming at first, clicking second, goes right in. Beautiful. Let's do low speed inputs here. Feels good. No jerkiness. Now, man, Race Pro maxed out. Oh, someone decided to make a U-turn in the middle of the road. Was not very smart. All right, second gear can pull you out of corners now. That shift cam technology working extremely well. Wow. This bike is insanity. Oh my God. So much power on tap. It's even carry me. Here we go. Oh yeah. Wow. This is such a change. It's so much more confidence inspiring. You don't have to worry about the bike powering on all of a sudden at 9,000 RPM. It's something you just constantly think about when you're trying to go through turns and muscle the bike. Now you can just worry about turning the bike, getting the power on. Downshifting very good. Mid-corner shifting very good. No upsets and balance. is like riding a robot, man. Very, very good. Wow. That's a sorted bike. So now that we saw what you did on the top end, let's see how we improve that 60 through 130. All right, and we are set for a 60 through 130. I have all the nannies off. You guys saw that was a 4.2 60 through 130, which is much better than that 4.9 60 through 130 we got stock. We also got a 4.1 100 through 150 versus that 4.5 100 through 150 we got stock. So those are massive changes. Now the top speed was 188 on both, which is actually much of an improvement from the stock and let's say the 2023. They restricted the top end less, and we saw that in the dyno. But we also see that in the real world where I only got like 170 something miles per hour on the 2023. On the 2025 stock tuning, I got 188, and then post flash 188, and that is gear limited, meaning there is no more gearing left in this bike. So I have to change the sprockets if I want to go faster than that. So to wrap up everything here, basically stage 1 tuning is going to be a de-restriction of the motorcycle with a lot of nuanced things or features that we add as well, and that's to keep the bike smooth and consistent, whereas a lot of other tuners, let's say competitors, they'll just kind of max everything out. The bike feels really jerky, doesn't feel right, it only feels good at 100% throttle, doesn't feel good at any other throttle position, and that's what we want to avoid. We also make sure, unlike competitors, we leave the knock sensors on. Some of them turn those off. We also make sure the timing, the ignition timing stays the same, meaning we have emergency mapping as well on the bike. If you put 87 octane on R flash, the bike's gonna feel like a dog, but it ain't gonna knock its brains out either. So be very careful who you choose for flashing on the BMW. I know there's quite a few people in the game now. I've even been logging gas mileage on this thing, and just so you know, if you're cruising just like this down the road, you're getting the same if not better gas mileage. But if you start getting to that restricted zone where second gear is restricted at 30% stock and now it's 100% and you're using 80% of that, yeah, it's going to require more fuel, so you're going to burn more fuel. But as far as cruising goes, as long as you don't have a heavy hand, you're going to be getting the same if not better gas mileage. And I know people are going to ask, how am I going to compare this bike, let's say, to our Ducati V4? And I'm going to do a very specific video for just the V4 versus the S1000. I'll write them back to back and give you guys my complete overall impressions. If you want me to give you the Cliff's notes here, it's going to be the S1000 feels very robotic. It feels very sorted. It feels extremely easy to ride. You can ride this thing slow, you can ride it fast, but it doesn't have that in-your-face attitude or the charisma, let's say, that a Ducati V4 has. Ducati V4 feels like you're on a race bike, and it lets you know that when you twist the throttle and you have all the nannies off, it wants to murder you. You just feel so much more connected to the bike, the road, everything on the Ducati, whereas the BMW, you can still go extremely fast on a BMW, don't get me wrong, but you're not getting that same feeling. Well, almost no one has anything bad to say about the BMW and how it rides, because you can ride it any way you want. There's a lot of people that don't like the Ducati just because it's so polarized in the way that it rides. It's either you like race bikes or you don't. And that's what the Ducati is. If you like more of a mellow bike with a mellow riding ergonomic, the BMW is perfect for you. It's a Swiss Army knife. It does everything great. Ducati, it goes fast great. It does not go slow great. Let's say below 6,000 RPMs, the Ducati is like, it's a mess. It's jerky, it doesn't feel great. And the flash that we do sorts out a little bit, but you ride these things back to back. It's not even a contest. This thing rides so much better at low RPMs. I can ride this thing comfortably at 2,000 RPM. So I think it's gonna do it for our stage 1 review, but stay tuned because the stage 2 review is coming and I'll be building the bike. I'll show you guys exactly what parts we're putting on it, how to install them, all the fun stuff, and that will be coming very soon. So I think it's gonna do it for this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.